champagne glass slipped from my hand and shattered against the marble floor the moment I heard those 5 words, and every head in that grand ballroom turned toward us as if the world itself had stopped spinning. "It's really you," the older woman whispered, her fingers trembling against my cheek, her eyes glistening with tears that had clearly been buried for decades. I had come to this wedding as nothing more than my boss's assistant, a nobody dragged along to carry her bags and smile politely at strangers. I never imagined that within hours I would discover the truth about who I really was. If you believe in second chances, in the quiet magic of fate bringing broken families back together, then stay with me, because this story will remind you why we still believe in miracles. And if stories like this move you, please hit that like button, drop a comment below, share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Humanity Tales so you never miss a story that touches your soul. My name is Elena Marsh, and 3 months ago I was just another overworked assistant trying to survive in a world that never seemed to notice me. I grew up in foster care, bounced between 5 different homes before I turned 18, and I had long since stopped asking questions about where I came from. Some wounds you learn to live with, not because they heal, but because there's no other choice. I built my life brick by brick with nothing but my own 2 hands, working double shifts through community college, finally landing a position as executive assistant to Victoria Hale, a sharp-tongued marketing director who ran her office like a battlefield and rarely said thank you. Victoria wasn't cruel, but she was distant, the kind of boss who saw people as tools rather than humans. I organized her calendar, fielded her calls, and absorbed her frustration on bad days, all while quietly nursing dreams of a life that felt bigger than delivering coffee and rescheduling meetings. When she told me, almost as an afterthought, that I would be accompanying her to her younger sister's wedding to help manage logistics, I assumed it was simply because she trusted no one else to keep her chaotic family gatherings under control. I packed a modest black dress, told myself it was just another work obligation, and boarded a plane to a coastal city I had never visited, with no idea that I was flying toward the answer to a question I had stopped asking years ago. The wedding venue was breathtaking, an old estate wrapped in ivy and golden light, the kind of place that seemed built for love stories, not mine. I spent the afternoon checking place cards and calming vendors, invisible in my role the way I had always been invisible in rooms full of important people. It wasn't until the reception, when the string quartet slowed into something soft and aching, that Victoria's mother, a graceful woman named Margaret with silver threading through her dark hair, approached me near the dessert table. She had been watching me from across the room for nearly an hour, she later admitted, unable to look away, her heart pounding with a suspicion she was too afraid to voice. She asked my name first, her voice unsteady, and when I told her, she asked where I was born, then who raised me, then whether I had a small crescent-shaped birthmark behind my left ear. My hand instinctively rose to that exact spot, the one birthmark I'd carried my whole life, mostly forgotten, hidden beneath my hair. That was when her composure shattered, when she reached for my face with both hands and whispered those words that would change everything. "It's really you." I stood frozen, glass falling, my mind spinning through 100 questions I didn't know how to ask, while the wedding around us blurred into background noise. Margaret explained, through broken sentences and tears she kept trying to wipe away, that 26 years ago she had given birth to a daughter she was forced to give up. A decision made under pressure from her own controlling mother-in-law during a time when Margaret was young, unmarried, and utterly powerless to fight for what she wanted. She had spent every year since then searching quietly, hearing investigators who led her nowhere, praying at night for a sign that her daughter was alive and safe somewhere in the world. She said she never stopped believing that one day, somehow, fate would circle back around. And staring at me, she said she saw her own mother's eyes staring back, the same eyes she saw every morning in old photographs she still kept hidden in a drawer. I wanted to believe her, and yet decades of disappointment had taught me not to trust easy answers, not to hope too quickly, because hope had betrayed me before. I asked her, my voice barely above a whisper, how she could possibly be certain after all these years, surrounded by wedding guests and clinking glasses and 100 distractions pulling us in different directions. She told me she had never removed the small gold locket she wore around her neck, and with trembling fingers she opened it to reveal a photograph of a newborn wrapped in a blue hospital blanket. A photograph that matched, almost exactly, an old photo I had carried in my wallet since childhood, one of the only physical connections I had to a past I never understood. Victoria appeared beside us then, confusion washing over her face as she looked between her mother's tears and my stunned expression, unaware that the assistant she had brought along as an afterthought might actually be the sister she never knew she had. When Margaret explained what she believed, Victoria's reaction wasn't jealousy or suspicion, but something quieter and more powerful, a kind of aching recognition, as if pieces of her own life were suddenly rearranging themselves into a picture that finally made sense. She admitted that she had always felt like something was missing from their family, an emptiness her mother never fully explained, conversations that would go silent whenever the subject of siblings came up during childhood. We didn't have DNA results that night, only a shared birthmark, a matching photograph, and an overwhelming, bone-deep feeling that refused to be explained away by logic. Margaret asked if she could hold my hand while we waited for the truth to be confirmed through proper testing, and I let her, because for the first time in my adult life, someone was looking at me not as an employee, not as background noise in someone else's story, but as something precious that had been lost and desperately searched for. We sat together on a stone bench outside the reception hall, while music and laughter drifted through the open doors behind us, and she told me everything, about the small apartment she lived in during her pregnancy, about the nights she cried herself to sleep after signing papers she never wanted to sign, about the name she had chosen for me before they took me away. A name disturbingly close to the one my adoptive parents had eventually given me, as though some invisible thread had guided their choice. The following week felt like living inside someone else's fairy tale, one I kept waiting to wake up from. The DNA results confirmed what Margaret already knew in her heart, that I was indeed her biological daughter, taken from her decades ago under circumstances that still filled her with grief and guilt she carried like a stone in her chest. Victoria, upon learning the truth, didn't treat me differently at the office out of pity, but instead invited me to family dinners, introduced me properly to relatives, cried openly the first time she called me sister rather than assistant. My entire concept of family, something I had convinced myself I would simply live without, was rewritten in the span of a single wedding. There were hard conversations too, ones that weren't wrapped in warm lighting and romantic music. Margaret and I spent long evenings working through decades of absence, the resentment I hadn't realized I was carrying, the guilt she couldn't release no matter how many times I told her I understood the impossible position she'd been placed in as a scared young woman with no support system. Healing wasn't instant, and some nights I still felt like an outsider peering through a window into a family that had built its history without me. But slowly, meal by meal, phone call by phone call, the distance between us began closing, replaced by something neither of us had dared to hope for. If this story has touched your heart even a little, if you believe that families can be found even after they've been lost, please take a moment right now to like this video and leave a comment below, because your voice reminds us why we keep telling these stories. And before we close this chapter, I want to ask something special from you, our viewer. Please comment the words "It's really you" if this story moved something inside you, so we know these words traveled beyond the screen and touched a real heart out there. 6 months later, I stood in that same coastal city, no longer as an assistant tagging along to someone else's celebration, but as a bridesmaid at my own sister's side, wearing a dress the color of the ocean, surrounded by a family I never knew I was allowed to have. Margaret watched from the front row with tears streaming freely down her face, no longer hiding her joy behind trembling hands, And when our eyes met across that crowded room, she mouthed those same 3 words that started it all, except this time they weren't a question or a disbelief, but a quiet, grateful truth. It's really you. And for the first time in 26 years, I finally believed it too.